Hello and welcome to the Walk Off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford, joined by our guest host for today, friend of the show, longtime friend of the show,
Good friend of the
longtime friend in general, buddy, Sean Lacomber. Welcome
best
back.
friend of the show. Does your show have a best friend? It probably does, doesn't it? Cupboards are
BFF of the
closed.
Walk Off, Sean Lacomber.
Cupboards are closed. Everything's good. We're all good. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Great talking to you, Scott. How's it going?
It is going very well. I like
You were in
the
Buffalo for the Votto thing. That's kind of cool when you're there for so like news happens and you're like, I was there when like I was there.
watching him announce his retirement in the parking lot that we had parked in to cover the game at Salem Field was really messed up. Where I'm like, hey, our car was there. Well, he's like, I am no longer a professional baseball player.
Talking where our car was. That's but yeah, because there would have been was there any Reds reporters there? Like, was it was
I
none.
was I was actually blown away with how little media was there in general. I was really hopeful that I'd get to talk with him, and I really pushed harder than I normally do. Normally they give you the rules and when you can talk with people and who you have availabilities with. And I was like, listen, like I've come from Toronto. It would be a dream to talk to Joey. And they're like, Joey only does scrums if he does something big in a game. He won't talk pregame. And I was like, yeah, but like this one
Yeah.
time, there's no one
And then
else
you
here.
and then you watch him swing through a bunch of pitches and you're like,
Oh
oh,
man.
he ain't talking after this one.
It's messed up, dude, that I actually saw his final professional baseball game ever. Like I go
Yeah.
down to hopefully talk to him before he gets called up to Toronto and then just to see him strike out three times
Was
and
he
take a
DHing?
walk.
Was he DHing?
He was playing first base.
Was playing first base. Okay.
Yeah. And made an error. So I got to see his final error and
I mean, I was bouncing back and forth between, I mean, I think it's Trump derangement syndrome obviously is a I mean, I don't even, well, because I'm far enough left that I don't even think that exists. I think he is an actual threat to democracy and the worst
yeah.
person alive and stuff. But I mean, everybody will throw that at you where it's just like, oh my God, you just have this derangement. But I think that a lot of people in the Blue Jays fan base have developed Atkins derangement syndrome where they just
Truly.
anything that happens, they're just like, that's Atkins, that's on Atkins. Like Joey, but at the same time, what was with the timing? You know what I mean? Like, there's ways of sending messages where it's like, what's with that timing? Like, why did he have to retire during the Red Series? Like, so obviously he did kind of want to play, you know what I mean? Like, otherwise you just, the focus comes back off of you after the Red Series, and then you retire next week, and it's not that big of a deal, and nobody tries to link it to Shapiro and Atkins, and maybe he should have been up for the Red Series. Like, it is, so it's hard to know what exactly it is, whether like where that fits between Atkins derangement syndrome and Joey Votto passive aggressively sending a message to the front office about, I mean, like when he knew the lights were on him, he retired kind of thing.
I just think that it was physical. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we hit record here, but he couldn't catch up with the fastball, man. And I'm not talking he couldn't catch up with 98, 99. He couldn't catch up with 93 miles an hour in AAA. And he knew it. That was one of the things he said in his press conference was baseball's an incredibly physical sport. Yes, there's the mental side of it, but if you can't get around on a fastball, it's over. And I think he
Yeah.
really wanted to end his career in a Blue Jays uniform. He wanted that one chance to play in front of his hometown crowd, and it just kind
Yeah.
of the writing was on the wall, right? I think it eventually hit him that I can't physically do it. And what kind of ball player wants to just be given a token
Yeah.
chance to do that? I don't think that's what he wanted, and I think that the Blue Jays would have given that to him,
Yeah.
especially if they wait long enough to the last homestand of the year or something, so the money's a little bit more minimal. So you're taking, you know, he plays one series and you're on the hook for $25,000 or something instead of whatever the prorated $2 million that he was guaranteed if he did get called up would be,
Hmm.
because you get paid by the game.
Yeah, that makes sense because then that would explain the timing, right? All of a sudden you have an increase in, media and attention because it's the Reds and you should be up and where's Joey
Hmm.
Votto? And meanwhile, you're playing down in AAA and guys are asking you like, are you mad you didn't go up? And you're just like, oh, you know what? I'm not even close, man. Like this is kind of embarrassing.
And I felt for him because that was kind of what he was emanating in his conference, like when he finally announced it. And man, I was there in Buffalo watching him. Like, he didn't have it. He couldn't catch up to the fastball. He was outdone by all these 25, 26-year-old kids. So why would you want to get pushed through and forced like into that moment? Like if it's just a manufactured disgenuine moment, is it going to
Yeah.
mean the same? Nah.
Until there's like some designated defender position where you can just throw him in at first base for a series and
Yes.
he just comes in and plays defense and doesn't hit. And it's funny how quickly people change, right? Where all of a sudden you're like, bring up Votto. It's a hell of a story. And it makes it very difficult for managers in a season that's lost or whatever, like
Hmm.
in particularly a lost season, because everybody's going to have their hobby horse and say, well, none of the games matter anyway. So do this,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, but I mean, we're still trying to get a look at these young guys. And, like, I'm a big believer in like, when you talk about like, it doesn't matter what happens in the last 6 weeks of a season or the last 2 months of a season when it's lost, like none of that stuff matters. Like, well, it matters if you don't play well. Like if you have young kids that come up and don't play well, don't hit.
See, and
Like
it's
that
so
matters.
funny that that's kind of the double-edged sword, right? Because people are so quick to, if they do well, throw it out, right? Doesn't really
Mhm.
matter. But if they do poorly, it does matter and it will affect whether or not you get
Yeah.
a real opportunity the next season.
And baseball's, it's different than a lot of other sports where it's like, that's 90. It's like, oh, he can only do it when it doesn't matter. It's like, well, that's still a pitch that's going 97 and riding in on his hands. I mean, and he hit it, you know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
not, like he'll probably, if he can do it when, it always matters. Like if you're a kid, if you're Loper Fido or you're Wagner or you're Horowitz, like these games really matter to you personally, like because it's gonna be the difference between getting another chance next year and sort of being AAA for life, right?
Especially with how badly this team needs offense. And you know that that's going to be the number one priority in the offseason. And it's a very fluid decision to make, right? Because wherever you can get the best bat, there's probably a position there that you can stick them into, right? So, like, all of these guys' jobs are on the line because there's so much uncertainty as to where they're going to find that big bat. Is it going to be in left field? Is it going to be third base? Is it going to be second base? Like, imagine it's second base and all these guys, Davis Schneider and Will Wagner and Spencer Horowitz. And I mean, every single guy on this Blue Jays team, it feels like plays second, So if they
Yeah.
can, if they can land a big bat, they're going to grab it where they can, so the uncertainty really makes it even more important for these guys that are kind of on the bubble to show something.
And as somebody who knows a lot more than I do about it, like, are we looking at the free agent class of hitters this year and saying the same things as basically last year, other than Soto, like where it's like, wow, there really aren't that many guys you'd want. Like, even if we could go back in time and sign one of the free agents, like had we signed Bellinger, it would have been considered a disaster.
Mhm.
In order to get him to come to Toronto, we would have had to go long term. And he would have been just a vortex out there, and people would have hated him, and they would have hated Atkins for signing him. So was that what we were supposed to do? Like, is it the same this year, or is there like, no, there's actually a half a dozen bats that would be good?
No, and that's where we're at. And we're going to dive far more into this. Lots to talk about on the show today. You can check us out on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. If you are a Patreon member, obviously, tip of the hat. Thank you so much. And lots of Patreon advantages. Obviously, you get MLB Mondays, little bonus content. You get automatic Patreon bump into the mailbag. And as if that's not enough, free access to our Discord. What a deal for $4 a month.
For
Uh,
Patreon. And then there should be certain levels in Patreon too, where it's like You know, if you're $20 a month, we'll answer all your questions, even if they're insulting, even if it's about our
Yes.
physical appearance and like how long have you
We
looked like
pretty
a
much do that. We pretty much do that. If you're the Hall of Fame tier, we have
Mhm.
open DMs 100% of the time for you. Of course, the second tier you get a mug if you're gonna pay that 13 bucks a
Okay.
month, Sean. You can
Okay.
drink out of a walk-off mug. It's a big deal.
And you got
Okay.
baseball town going. It's going good. Yeah, you got
Yeah.
baseball town and you've
Baseball
got
town's been
and you
great,
do
man.
like baseball roasts too, right? You do like,
Yeah. It's been fun with it, number one, it
you
is
could do a
definitely.
Shapiro versus Atkins roast.
Oh man, I should do a Shapiro versus Atkins roast. That would be
That would be pretty
fantastic.
funny to see those two fake guys blaming each other for how shitty this all went.
Yeah, neither of them taking any accountability. That would be the perfect thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. It's been kind of interesting, dude, finding all these comics in Toronto that like are huge baseball nerds that I had no idea that they had the same ridiculous passion that I did. And they're like, oh man, I want to roast this team. Like, let me in. So
Well, I remember, Brian Hatt. I knew Brian Hatt
yeah,
like the time when I was out in Toronto. Like I knew like, oh, Brian loves the Jays. Like there's a lot of them that love the Jays for sure.
there are absolutely. And
Whether you
the
got
next
dragged
baseball
into whether you
town.
got dragged into it in 92, 90, whether you're a 90s kid who got dragged into it by
Yes.
those teams or you're a 15, 16 kid, because there'd be a generation of comics that got into it for the in the Josh
Well, I mean,
Donaldson period.
Sean, we were kind of fucked over by the sports gods because they totally gave us an unfair picture of what sports fandom is, right? Oilers fan, Flames fan,
Mhm.
right? 90s kids. You grow up thinking, yeah, you just follow your favorite team and they win a Stanley Cup every second year. 89, the Flames finally win. Jays win in 92, 93. Like as an 11-year-old and like a 13-year-old, we were
Mhm.
just walking around the world thinking, yeah, you just put your time in and then obviously you win it all every couple of
Yeah,
years. No big deal.
you
Why
might
wouldn't
have
you
to
invest all sorts of energy into this?
rebuild. You might have to rebuild for a year, but then you win the championship.
But then you win the championship, right back to it.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you might have to go through these rough patches called a rebuild, but then when you bounce out of it, you're holding trophies. Like, yeah. And now we're like, no, 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 no. You can come out of that and win nothing. And a baseball rebuild makes even less sense than a hockey rebuild. Like hockey is pure socialism, which it's the purest form, and hockey fans would hate to hear that. It is the purest form of socialism because there's no way out of here's you get the first overall pick. I know there's percentages and there's little rules and stuff, and you can't, just get it automatically, but the best player is going to that selected worst team. Baseball's insane.
Yeah.
Like trying to pull off a baseball rebuild where you're like, I mean, I got the first pick, but I don't, I have the allotment, like the money to spend on, we got to save the money for our other draft picks. Like what? Like none of it makes sense to me.
It's
Like
wild. It is a wild system, especially when you start getting into the international free agency side
I
of
know,
things.
like
Yeah.
none of it makes sense. Everybody, and then Japan's over here. Like you're like, well, why isn't Japan and the Dominican Republic and Cuba and the United States and Canada, why isn't all of them in the draft?
Yeah.
How is that even possible that they're not all just in the draft?
I mean, they tried to do it with the CBA, and it was one of the ones where ownership was like, fuck that. And it's just because the bigger markets want to be able to flex that money. And I mean, you're all given an international draft pool, but then you can
Okay, yeah.
mess with it, right? You can trade money to one side or take money
Mhm.
on from someone else. It's wild. Lots to talk about
And
here
owners,
though.
okay, so and the owners didn't. So yeah, that's interesting because then the big money owners, because that's something I guess I always struggle with is thinking like, well, the owners, they're their own little democracy, but probably not really. There probably are, the five biggies make a lot of the decisions.
Especially with the revenue sharing. Some of these small market teams, dude, they are fine losing because they make more money when they lose than when they win, which is definitely a problem. But
That's
uh
insane.
let's get into the show here because there is lots to talk about. We're gonna go into the fact that for the first time in a long time, the Toronto Blue Jays are scoring. Of course, their bullpen's a dumpster fire, so it's not necessarily translating into wins. We'll talk that. We'll talk the bullpen. We'll touch on Joey Votto, Hall of Fame or not. Chris Bassett comments. Listen, I talked this on Tuesday's mailbag, but Sean, of anyone I could talk about Chris Bassett's comments with, I want to know what you think on it. We'll talk trade deadline, winners and losers, and where the former Blue Jays who were traded and how they're doing. And then, annoyingly enough, we will end the show talking Aaron Judge and what a great talent he is. He's doing
Yeah.
insane things again.
I
And
wish he was hurt.
what I love about Aaron Judge, Sean, Yankees fans still will blame him 100% if
Mhm.
they're not like they're not going to just blow the roof off and win the division this year. They still might win the division, but it's not a runaway. And this is
Mhm.
very upsetting to Yankees fans, even though he's literally putting up Babe
I
Ruth
know.
numbers.
Yeah, it'd still be that wild card team that sneaks in. Well, it's been impressive that, the narrative that we've had the last few years is like, well, all you got to do is sneak into that third wild card. Well, sneaking into that third wild card right now is like 15 games over 500.
Yeah, it's not
Like,
sneaking in anymore. It's like you
no.
got to win 90
So,
games.
yeah, we're back to it being a legitimate playoff spot.
But boy, the have-nots are sure a lot worse, though, Sean. It's great to see
Yeah. And
the
of course,
Chicago
the
White
Jays
Sox
are,
flirting with a 120
I gotta get
loss
rid of,
season.
I gotta get rid of this cat.
Yes, you take
Yeah.
care of that cat. My
We
cat does this thing
we
where,
have a cat that just like literally just runs around and meows.
yes, our cat's also very talkative. And the funny thing with it, he doesn't care whether there's food or not. So like if his food dish is full, that's not going to determine whether he is going to sit there and meow in your face or not.
Well, and my family, they'll close their doors. So they're like, I love cats. Can we get another cat?
Right.
I don't know. I don't, I'm not, I guess. And then we get a third cat, and then they go into their rooms and close their door. And their cat,
Right.
and then the cats are like meowing and running around. I can't get into my people's
Yes. Because as
rooms.
soon as
And
you
then I'm
close the
like, can
door
you
on a
guys open
cat,
the door?
as soon as you close the door on a cat, they automatically think party. There's a big party going
There's a
on.
huge party going on in there. People have hard food. There's
Soft
soft food.
food,
There's
treats,
tuna.
everything I could want. It's
There's
a cat paradise in
there's
there.
shot
Yeah.
glasses filled with milk. Some
Okay.
2%, some homo.
This is a stat, Sean, that reminds me of Mr. Baseball when he gets cut, right, from the Yankees, and he's like, I'm getting cut. I have the most doubles in afternoon games after the seventh inning. How can you do that? So this is this kind of stat. But the Los Angeles Angels, who the Blue Jays are facing off against, obviously they won
Great
yesterday.
team, fun team.
Great team. What a prime example of exemplary front office
Yeah,
work.
makes us look good. Like, I
It
mean,
does make us
it
look
makes
good.
us
Nobody
look
makes the
good.
Jays look as good as the Angels. That's true.
No.
So the Los Angeles Angels have not won on August 23rd in 11 years.
Now, keep in mind, for 4 of those years, they had an off day.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's a pretty, yeah, that is a funny stat. That is pretty funny. And oh yeah, did you? Because I was gonna, well, I don't know if it was in your show notes, but like the Ernie Clement stuff is just,
Isn't it
you know,
insane?
he's just he's one of those guys where like, and the thing that was crazy about it, because when you brought up that stat, it made me think of, I read something yesterday about Ernie Clement having fifth percentile slowest swing speed, and he's in the bottom 5% in swing speed, and he's such a great athlete that he can catch up to 97 at his chin and hit it out of there.
It is insane, man. That home run he hit last night. Okay, so the pitch was 4.6 feet above the ground. Like, it makes zero sense. He got around on that. And just to put in perspective, nobody except for Kyle Higashioka, New York Yankee in 2022, has hit a home run that was throwing that high in the history of them keeping StatCast.
And was the one that he hit 97.
Yeah.
It was like, it was because that, I mean, to me, I'm like, well, is that maybe the most impressive hit in baseball history? Because how could you, because you could go back in time and say, oh no, another guy hit one that was 4.7 and it was a home run. It's like, yeah, but was it 97 miles an hour? Like,
Ernie Clement doesn't strike out. He also doesn't walk. I mean, obviously, if you're swinging at pitches 4.6 feet above the ground and you're
mhm.
making contact, your swing decisions, maybe there's something to question there. But I love his approach that he's just like, I'm gonna get hits. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
hits or I'm gonna get out. I don't strike out. I don't walk. He has 9 home runs on the year.
Well,
But
he's one of, you know how people will talk about like, oh, he's a ball player or whatever. I don't even see Ernie. I see Ernie Clement as the opposite. I see him as like a great athlete who chose baseball.
Mhm.
You know, but like, and that's why he makes like bad swing decisions and stuff, because it's like he doesn't have a disciplined approach that was baked into him from the time he was 6. Like, he's a guy who probably is a very good golfer, probably is a very good basketball player, probably, could pick up and be great at hockey within a month. He's just a really good
Oh,
athlete.
guys like that are annoying, eh?
I know. Yeah. Just like, you're just like, well, it's going to take him a while to figure out the wakeboard. And then like you see him flipping and spraying you. Ernie. So yeah, I mean, he's unbelievable. So you want
Do
him
you think,
coming off
Sean,
the bench.
do you think that Ernie has earned himself the utility role for next year? Like, do you think he's the new Kevin Biggio? These are his numbers since July 28th. So he's hitting 293. He's got an on base of 330, a slug of 489, and a weighted runs created plus of 129. He just hit his 9th home run. I mean, this is a guy that plays 2/3 of the time. Seems like
Mhm.
a pretty valuable dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And he does it in sort of, he's almost the opposite of Biggio, but yeah, he could fill the same role where
Truly.
Biggio was very disciplined, had a very good eye, but
God forbid you swing. That was what
yeah,
you don't take that bat off your shoulder, Kevin.
no. And he had like one swing. He's one of those one swing guys. He had one big fluid swing, probably going to miss. Whereas Ernie's got 19 different swings. He's swinging at the pitch over his head. He's swinging it like, yeah, it's totally insane.
I mean, you put it perfectly when you were like, Ernie hasn't had the swing approach baked into him since he was 6. Kevin Biggio, on the other hand, definitely has had it baked since he was,
Mhm.
like out of the oven, right? Like,
Yeah. And he wanted it. I mean, and Biggio was a very smart player, like a very heads up player, like a high IQ baseball player, where, he always made the right decision, whether it was an odd play defensively that only happens once every 3 years. He'd kind of pick up the ball and go, oh, I'm supposed to do this, this, and this. Like, so he was very good at processing the game. He was a good, but just couldn't hit enough on a team that couldn't hit. And then you got a
yeah,
jet the guy. But Ernie definitely has earned a spot in my mind, because if you're in a pennant race, like, and you got a guy coming off the bench and there's runners on first and second and there's 2 outs and you need a base hit to tie it and go to extra innings, you want the guy that can just get up there and
yeah.
slap it
And not
somewhere.
going to strike out. And that's
No.
huge that he doesn't strike out, right? Like his strikeout rate is way below the major league average. And again, so is his walk rate. But, just a guy who can put the ball in play, you can
And
find a
with the
spot for
fifth
that.
percentile slowest swing speed.
It's
Like,
wild.
how's that? It doesn't even, I mean, maybe the stat I was looking at was for third baseman or something, but I mean,
Still,
it shows you that he has slow swing speed and he's still able to make contact with all these pitches with a nice little slow swing. Like, it's just, I mean, it's insane to think about. And
so
he's very good
explain,
defensively. Like, he's got good hands
he
defensively,
does.
the ball quickly from third. So he knows, he's like, he doesn't have a cannon for an arm, but he unloads it in a hurry. I
And the
mean,
fact he
yeah.
plays third and short and second and can play some left field, he can get around the diamond, very Kevin Biggio like. So explain this to me, Sean. This is the Blue Jays since August 11th. Now, yes, these numbers are impressive, but I will say that they are 5-5 in this stretch. All right. But since August 11th, they have 21 home runs. That's first in Major League Baseball. They have 47 extra base hits. That's number 1 in baseball. They have a 488 slugging percentage. That's number 1 in baseball. 5-5 because the bullpen still sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, we never could figure that out. And then we traded the good pieces out of it. And we're like, So I mean, yeah, I guess we can't be surprised. You don't
Yeah,
get
you
to have
can't be surprised with this pen.
what are we going to get for Jimmy Garcia? You can't spend 2 weeks being like, what are we going to get for these bullpen pieces, and then afterwards be like, the bullpen collapsed again. Like, of course it did, you idiots. Like, the good ones are gone. You got rid of
Yeah.
guys. You kept all, and some of them we don't even, so we're hoping people get outs, and we're not even planning on bringing them back next year. Like, you're watching them go out there and you're like, this
I
guy's
mean,
not gonna.
we Tampa Bay raid that game last night. You had Ryan Burr as the starter. Then Ryan Yarborough comes out and pitches 5 scoreless innings because of course he does, right?
Mhm.
And then in comes Tommy Nance to give up 3 runs in the
I
ninth.
mean, Nance.
Like, and
My
that's the
God.
thing. Like, man, listen to this bullpen. Tommy Nance, Ryan
Oh
Burr,
crap. Sorry,
Ryan
I gotta go.
Yarborough.
I gotta grab my charger. Sorry.
Yeah,
Dude, I've
yeah.
really screwed you over today.
No, no,
Okay.
no, no, no. Sean has to plug his
I
computer
have to
in.
make Nance
Otherwise, we.
quiet. I have to plug in my stuff.
Hey, at least we started this thing with your cupboard closed. So little
I know
victories.
that's what it was. Like, please close your cupboards. It's disgusting. What? What?
That
Those
is
are my
not
old
how I
cats.
said that.
Those are my old dead cats. Oh, that a taxidermological mess.
So
No.
this is our current bullpen. Tommy Nance, Ryan Burr, Ryan Yarborough, Genesis Cabrera, Brandon Little, Zach Pop, Eric Swanson, and Chad Green. So
Hmm.
if you take a look at who started the year with this team, we have Eric Swanson and Chad Green and Genesis Cabrera. 3 of the 8. Everyone else is gone or has been injured or whatever it is. This is a crazy stat, too. So last year, Jordan Romano, Tim Meza, and Eric Swanson allowed 16 home runs in 179 innings. This year, they've thrown 114 fewer innings, but have allowed more home runs.
That is totally insane.
Why is
If you
this
think
bullpen
about,
bad?
and it's sort of funny because it almost gives some credence to sort of what Atkins or Shapiro would say at a press conference that would make you
Yeah,
roll your eyes, which is like, you know how many things went wrong here. Like, Mesa had to be sort of like shake his hand and bye, see you later.
mm,
Like, you just watch him slowly drift away in a little boat. You're just like, see ya. Sorry, couldn't get people out anymore.
yeah.
Same thing as Swanson.
Of course, now
Couldn't.
that he's wearing a Yankees jersey, he's been great. It kills me. I don't. You know what? Like I like Tim Meza. I've always liked Tim Meza. He's just kind of that underdog success
Mhm.
story that is so palpable as a fan, right? But him in a Yankees jersey, it just like I wish him all the best. But of all the
Mhm.
jerseys, it's like watching Danny Jansen in a Red Sox jersey. It's just like, oh, this
I
just
know.
feels
And
weird.
then you're gonna see them, invariably come out and say, nice to get a fresh start. And yeah, and you're like, really? What was wrong with where you were? Nice to get a fresh start on, like, just throwing a little shade at Blue Jaydom.
Yeah.
Like, they all do. They all leave and then go, you know what? That was bad and this is good. And you're like, okay, great.
I mean,
Like,
Matt Chapman came out just last week and was like, yeah, I never really felt comfortable in Toronto. Like, fuck, Sean. He spent 2 years here. 2 years. Never felt comfortable.
yeah, he was always like a guy who gave you an I'm a dick vibe. You know what I mean? Like, he's a dick. So people were like, he stood up to Schneider. And it's like, no, that's a dick move to show him up in front of people. And you're saying something that, is like, just a dumb guy baseball hot take where you're like, one fucking guy on the team that can hit and we're not pitching around him. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not gonna give him, you're not gonna throw up four fingers every time he comes up. Like, you're gonna try to get him out at times. You're gonna try to get people out. So to have Chapman, so to me, Chapman was like, kind of a douchebag, excellent defender, would go hitless for 3 months. Like, tone it down. Like, you're going 3 months without being able to hit a
Yeah.
baseball and you're walking
Yeah.
around with your Aaron Judge attitude. Like, I don't know. So I never
And
really,
also, Aaron Judge would never do that. He would
No,
never.
no, you'd never show him up like that. Like, and you're doing it for the fans and whatever, and Schneider's in the hot seat and you're grinding them. Like, guaranteed Schneider and everybody in the Blue Jays organization hated when Chapman did that because it was just a dumb guy baseball take where it's like, he's the only guy that can get a hit and we're fucking pitching to him. Like, save it for, the dressing room, man. Like,
Brown's
yeah.
crew, I
So,
would love to hear what you think of Matt Chapman's, and drop your comments below, because I do um it kind of made me go, "Oh, weird that he's bringing it up now," cuz he always did the right lip service, and like guys are pretty trained to not say anything that might affect how much money they get down the road, right? And it's not like Matt Chapman opened up the flamethrower and torched this Blue Jays front office, but he
mhm.
also he touched on it a little, and this is a perfect transition into Chris Bassett, because I want to hear what your thoughts were on Chris Bassett. Bassett goes on Chris Rose's show, and incredibly honest. Loved how forthcoming he was with his opinion, something you don't get very much of in baseball. I mean, forget baseball, in sports in general, right? Like these guys, very much like Kevin Biggio was beaten into him since a small child not to swing at bad pitches. Uh, you know,
Yeah, literally,
ah,
probably. And Bichette too, right?
yeah,
we've had a, I mean, I don't know if it's just baseball, but we've had like a guys who are dicks problem. But when they win, you're like, that's our dick. That
yeah.
Josh Donaldson is
Josh
our,
Donaldson, bringer of rain.
yeah, like, just an asshole, just a born asshole. But he was our born asshole.
Yes,
And we won. And Bichette it could have been our born asshole, like
yes.
little dour pussycat who like he gets his paws wet. He's like, eh. So he's but if we'd won, he would have been our little baby, our little
Yes,
fucking, but
yes.
we didn't win, so he's just like, whatever. And then instead of blaming Bo Bichette, we blame the front office. Like Bo's great, and I mean, Bassett's comments to me were like the funniest part to me was how much shade he was like sort of throwing at Vladdy part. Like when I heard he was going to third base, I was like, this is going to be the biggest fucking disaster and it's like, what? Like you knew he was giving you like gold glove defense at first. You
Yeah,
thought it was going to be just a disaster having him at third. So
yeah.
like that was what struck me was like the fact that he was like, I thought that when I heard he was going to third, I thought there's gonna be a shit show. And it also kind of shows you that it wasn't like necessarily set up for it wasn't like something he talked about with his teammates where he's like, I'm gonna go on one of these shows and I'm gonna tell people how we really feel and whatever. I
Yes.
don't think it was that because otherwise he would have really like he would have been like, oh, Vladdy was at third. Yeah, I always knew he'd be good at third. Like he said, I thought this was going to be a train wreck, Vladdy at third. And when I got here, I was like, Vladdy, you keep talking about Vladdy 2021. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see
This
it.
is the thing with these long form interviews. And it's why I love having ball players on the show for 30 to 45 minutes. Because if you just get them for 5 minutes, they're too smart. They're too trained to just say the right thing, right? And it's
Mhm.
just such a canned answer. But if you can get them talking and relax them and lull
Yeah.
them into a sense of security,
The
right? Then
the hypnotic factors involved in
the
podcasting.
the honesty starts to come out, and that's the thing with that Chris Bassett interview. I watched the whole thing, and he was definitely like not trying to roast anyone. Like it didn't come across like he was so frustrated that he was just gonna take a few people down a peg, including the front office. But I do think that some genuine honesty about how frustrated they are as a team with where they're at was on display. And then to the point where I truly believe the front office then went to him and was like, no, 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 no. we're going to send Arden and Cheyenne for
Yeah.
clarification. And you're going to, because this is my favorite clarification here, Sean. Okay. Bassett about his unfixable problems, which was so obvious
Mhm.
that he's talking about systematic problems within this organization. Like it was just
Oh,
like,
again, I'm
what
not
else
going to
was
get
he
into
talking
it.
about?
Some of the problems can't be fixed. That's like, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
tough one. That's
So
like,
then his clarification was, I'm going to be 36 next year. You can't change me to 26. I just love that he's like, listen, what I was talking about is we don't have an anti-aging machine.
yeah,
Obviously. Why is everyone acting like I'm talking about the front office?
all of the creams we have at Dunedin don't do anything for the bags under my eyes. Yeah, like our skincare regimen sucks around here, is what I meant. I just meant there's not enough oil of Olay flowing around. I mean, I don't, yeah, that was pretty funny because that's the same thing as like in your marriage saying like a lot of the problems we have are unfixable. Like, what do you mean by that? You know, like you're
Yeah.
like your wife's gonna be like, you know, what do you mean? You know, if your wife is like, what do you mean by unfixable? And we're just like, oh no, I meant me, I meant me, I meant me, I
Me,
meant
me,
yeah,
definitely me. And that
yeah,
front
I'm the
door. You know
guy.
how long I've been
I'm a,
trying to fix that front door, right?
you know me, I'm an idiot. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's what that smelled like was just like, yeah, I mean, and you're right, the rights holders pop in. But the crazy thing is Rogers has done a really good job of of really squeezing everybody out except rights holders, really. Like when, maybe it's because most of the stuff I watch is Rogers, but it's like, TSN's not, Bell Media is not really, they basically chosen a route of like de-emphasizing the Blue Jays in general,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, right? They'll,
Which is easy this year.
yeah, it's been, but they
The
have like
Blue Jays have done a good job of de-emphasizing themselves, you know?
they really have, and then like who's the TSN Blue Jays guy? Is it some Steve Phillips or something, or some Philip
Scotty
like?
Mitchell. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Scotty Mitchell's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
He's pretty good, yeah. So, but
But
still,
one guy. They have
one
one guy.
guy, and they'll talk baseball on a Sports Center show for a couple minutes, and it'll be mostly just baseball in general. So Rogers owns this whole package, and yeah, like Arden and Shy. That's what I mean. We've talked about it a few times. Like they don't. I can't believe that they don't throw Arden Shy or Ben Nicholson Smith any bones. Those
Zero
guys don't
bones.
lead on any story. They
No.
don't know anything. They know nothing. Jeff Blair knows nothing. Like Calgary media and Edmonton media for Oilers and Flames, you always have one or two guys who kind of like just have the inside track. They have the ear of the owner.
Yeah.
They're rights holders too. They're the right. And so the trade-off is we're going to give you some nuggets. And when there's a tricky press conference, like Stan Bowman is being interviewed after what happened in Chicago, you're going to get the first question, and you're going to say, "What's your favorite kind of cheese? What are your three favorite ice creams, Stan?" And that's the
We'll
trade-off.
make a little
But
vignette of this. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the trade-off. And in Blue Jays world, there's none of that. There's no
Mm-hmm.
like Shy asking softballs in return for getting information about a player being moved 2 hours before anybody else knows. They give them nothing. So that gives me an idea of like the Blue Jays front office and Rogers, they're not good people. Otherwise, they would throw like Shy seems like a nice guy. These guys seem nice. Like, why can't they
Absolutely.
be the one who breaks all the Blue
Break a,
Jays
a
stories?
story here and there. And the one time it happened, Bud, Hazel May broke that Michael Brantley was coming to Toronto, and all it wound up being was somebody trying to flush out where the leak is and just threw Hazel under the bus, right? It's like, we know where the leak is. Also, you're wrong.
We were never bringing in Brantley. May's never gonna. And imagine the other guys, like the girl. It's the hot girl side, and she gets it. Like Shy's is like I'm like a 53-year-old Jewish guy. I need this.
I need this. Old Gil needs a sale.
I fucking needed this, and they give it to the lady in a dress. Unbelievable.
And then afterwards, I'm sure he was like, "Whew, thank God that was Hazel."
Yeah, like, but I mean, I know I've brought that up on this podcast before, but it is mind-boggling to me that those guys don't get anything. I mean, other than like, you get to keep working here. That's what you get. You get to keep working, Shy. You
Mm,
get this job. That's it. And I don't say they're not apologists for the Jays. Like they
no
take kind of a middle of the road approach, but they're allowed to say what they want. I think that they have quite a bit of autonomy
leeway.
in terms of, but there would be certain things like, yeah, we don't touch that. We don't talk about that. Or
But there are moments like the Chris Bassett scenario where you can tell that they're being assigned, go smooth this over, gentlemen, right? Like go make
yeah,
sure
they're
that
being told
go
like,
make
can
sure
we
that
get
Chris
some
Bassett clarifies
clarification?
that it is in fact that we don't have a time machine. And that's the problem that he's talking
Mhm.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably like a two-pronged thing where it's like, you're going to go in, you're going to ask for clarification, and if the clarification sucks, we're not writing about it. You know, if the clarification is, oh yeah, no, I meant Ross and Mark have fucking just decimated that. Like, okay, we're not going to go there. We're not writing that. Let somebody else write that article because that's. But yeah, it was interesting to see because Bassett, what I watched his like whatever behind. Here he's a nice guy. Like yeah, they're all. I mean, they're worth 80 million. Like how nice I'd be if I like but I mean, I watched that behind the, what he does in the off season stuff, and he's like out there, moving wood out of a stream because the beavers and you're
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? Like this guy's in the muck.
Oh
Like,
yeah. He's nobody has wears camo so genuinely. You
yeah,
know, like you're like,
yeah, it's
oh
not a
yeah.
joke. It's not a pretend war thing. It's just him being like, nah, the goddamn beavers have,
Yeah.
plumbed off one of the streams I need to come down and feed my animals. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? You're worth $174 million and you're moving wood away
You're
from,
knee deep in mud clearing out a beaver dam. Yeah.
but it's fun to see like guys like that are like hobbyists and how many toys they can accumulate. Cause he's like, I better run and get my $243,000 backhoe or
Yeah.
maybe I'll run and get my $640,000 combine, or maybe,
But they're
maybe
running it all. Like they're
yeah,
they're no
yeah.
one they're not paying anyone to do it for them.
No, he's bringing out his skid steer. He's got the Bobcat. He's got the front end loader. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing. So he kind of is a genuine, he seemed like this is a genuine guy giving probably a pretty genuine answer. It wasn't necessarily meant to be an affront to the front office, even though, like, he had sort of a very fansy take where he was like, we couldn't pivot away from Shohei. And it's like there, but I mean, but I think it's funny how we're like, everybody can agree, like, yeah, we had the Shohei thing, but for me, the impact of the Shohei thing was purely psychological
Yeah.
for the fan base and for players,
Even the players.
for
Yeah.
management, was because like there was no pivot away from, there was nothing else. Like that,
It's kind of like going up to just you or I, right? And giving us a lottery ticket and being like, you now have 20% chance at $1 billion.
yeah,
And even though you're like 20%, like that's
that's
not
not
great. That's
that's not
not
a
great.
hundred,
No,
know.
but like
You're
also you're
definitely
like
going to spend the next 2 weeks
spend
being
next
like,
2 weeks spending
I
that $1 billion. Yes.
uh, like, and your wife's like, should we get pizza? Yes, we should get pizza.
Two
Like,
largest. Where
you're making reasonably poor financial decisions in those 2 weeks. Yeah, and then it set us up. It just raised the expectations for what this season could be. And then when it didn't happen, it just deflated everybody. And I think looking back, years from now, we'll say it deflated that year.
Mhm.
Like the players were like, oh boy, and it was like, I mean, it shouldn't have been that big of a deal because Shohei smiled his way through it while somebody was pulling money out of his pockets. Like, I mean, I don't know what's more of an indictment of a person's character, like the fact that I would have thought I would have thought more highly of Shohei if he was kind of like dabbling and betting through his translator rather than like, I didn't even know money was gone.
Yeah.
Was 5 million gone? I didn't even know. I don't look at the accounts. I just throw balls, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm so focused on
I just
baseball.
hit bombs and strike guys out. Sorry.
I didn't know 5 million was missing. Like, unbelievable. Like, it's just great
Oh.
that you get to be that good at baseball and you're just like, I don't know nothing about money, man. Like what, but it must have been a couple that would have been the funny thing is for Shohei, there must have been a couple of days where Shohei was like, "Hey, I need you to like buy me an e-scooter." And he was like, this is a bad week
Yeah.
to buying e-scooters. Like it would be a funny movie to be like a rich baseball player who only cares about baseball and his translator who's spending all of his money behind his back and then explaining in a different language to everybody else that and Shohei doesn't speak that language. So there's all these things going on, all these fires he's trying to put out verbally, and Shohei once in a while wants the car. He wants an e-scooter. He wants the stuff. And this guy knows there's no money in the accounts, even though this guy makes 60 million a year or
Oh
whatever.
my
So
God.
it would be like a funny little Brewster's Millions type show where he's just like, oh my God, this guy doesn't know anything. But
That
I
is
guess
the sitcom I want. That honestly, like that is what I want. Give
that is
me
a funny.
that.
Yeah. But I guess I don't know what we were talking about Bassett, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny. He's honest, and I don't. He unlike Chapman and Bichette, like I don't get a dick vibe from him. I get like he's
No.
a genuine guy, and maybe he was kind of pissed off at the front office for not grabbing another bat. Like maybe he that pissed him off, but I don't.
And I would be fine with that. I mean, it's not like the front office didn't know they needed a bat, right? Like it's not like the front office wasn't well aware of how bad this offense was in 2023 and decided they were going to plug the hole with 39-year-old Justin Turner, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that's no slight on Turner. It's just like wrong guy, like Turner would have been a perfect piece to add on, let's say, a Baltimore Orioles team, right? A team that's just like killing it, full of young
Mhm.
guys that could use a little bit of guidance in that type of scenario. A guy where you can lower his playing time and it not be a big thing to him, right? Pay him his $13 million, and if he winds up playing 80 games that year and is mostly just a mentor to the kids, great, right? You're
Yeah.
you're you're paying for an
And he was
expensive coach, but
and I mean, in politics they talk all the time about like vibes are more important than policy. And in baseball, it's like somebody's got to start hot. Somebody's got to really a couple of guys have to really start hot so that the vibes are good. Like
yeah,
there's just these positive and it just runs courses through a whole team. And we just didn't really have that. Like no, I mean Turner started well,
yeah,
IKF, but IKF didn't start well. IKF was like no, so the vibes on the team right from day one were like, oh man,
this
here
again.
we go again.
And that's the
Like,
thing. It's such a mental game. As soon as you start buying into, oh no, it's happening again, it's happening again. Right? Like as
yeah.
soon
And if
as
and if Vladdy had started the season the way that he has been hitting for the last 2 months, if the first 2 months were like this, you'd be like, give this guy 40 million. Like,
yeah.
but when you do
It's
it
the end of
later on,
Ghostbusters, Sean. Right? Like it's the end of Ghostbusters where it's like, don't think it. Don't you think about that Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Oh, you thought
yeah.
about it. Great.
Oh, here we go again. I don't know. And what are you gonna do? Yeah, I mean, it just opens up, and now Bo has to be gone. Like I remember 2 years ago, nobody was talking about like, oh, Bo does. It almost seemed like Bo was the one who was more likely to sign
Yeah.
because Vladdy
One
was
year
always
ago,
the
I would have said that.
one year
Yeah.
guy, and Bo was like, I like being locked in. I like the security, and I like the training facilities here, and I'm a baseball, rat, and I'm all, like, and so it seemed like a decent fit with the Blue Jays, and then
There's no rules on hair length. It's great here.
yeah. And I get to play shortstop because a lot of other teams, let's be honest, would just move him to second.
Probably should have.
Like not a great shortstop. So an aesthetically pleasing shortstop, like makes cool throws. When he makes the plays, they look
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But not a guy, but I mean, and at second base, you can sort of turn yourself into a Marcus Simeon where you're like, I'm a second base robot, like, born to hit, but like just kind of figured out second base and how to huck it over like a shot put. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, but Bassett, I liked what he had to say, but yeah, I mean, I guess if you were conspiracy minded, you could say like he knew how it was going to be interpreted. He knew that a million stories would be written about it overnight and into the morning, and then he would clarify. But by then, the poison's in the well,
Yes.
you know. So you could say that if you wanted to, but I don't know if I don't think he was doing that.
So we're going to talk a little bit more Joey Votto here, and then we'll check in on former Blue Jays from the trade deadline and just kind of see who the
Oh
winners
yeah.
and losers of the trade deadline were. So Joey Votto, let's start with this. I read a Jerry D story on Twitter that
Okay.
I just loved. So basically, Jerry is a buddy of Joey's from his score days. They're mutual friends through a friend of his that he didn't mention. But this was about 6 years ago. Joey reached out to him. He was coming home to Toronto for the summer, and he was like, "Hey, I want to join an improv class. Do you know anybody?" So
Really?
Jerry did a little digging. Obviously, we're comedians, so he can find that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
And gave Joey the name of this lady. So he actually signs up for this improv class, goes through this 6 week improv class, not recognized once. Like, soon to be Hall of Famer, right? All these fucking improv nerds
I
just have
love
like
it.
one of the best ball players
That's
to
so
ever play
funny.
the game in this country in their improv class, and they're just yes anding Joey
I
Votto.
know that's so funny that it's like, yeah, only in improv would you have these people that are so navel gazy, so
Yeah,
into their own shit, so
yeah.
narcissistic with no chance of success. Because all you're doing is like doing a little dance and like singing and touching a dirty part. Let's bring
Give
up an
me a
audience member.
location.
Yeah, any room in that. What's your favorite room in the house? Oh my God. Like there's no more talentless pool of just post high school drama losers than improvisers because you can lean on other people and you're just doing your little artsy dance and maybe you sing a little bit. So it's so funny to me that he walks into that like just talentless, just a no. I mean, Joey Votto would have been the funniest person in that room the second he walked in, but
Yeah.
everybody else would have been like, "Here's how you do it. Here's how you like." I mean, the number of people that I know that are like that, that sort of post grade 12 drama. What do I do with my drama energy? I've got to take this to improv where you
For
can
those
just
of
be
you listening,
barbaric.
thinking that this is harsh, this is just unfortunately how stand up comics in a lot of cases do improv.
Well,
Sorry.
and
Sorry,
it's,
not sorry.
I mean, I'm not shitting on sketch comedy here, am I? Like
No,
those people have to write their own stuff. They have to perfect it. They have to craft it. They have to hone it. I'm not shitting on sketch. I'm not shitting on
no.
stand up. I am shitting on improv because it's just like take it to a cruise ship, bro. Like this is insane what you're doing. It's not, it's a nothing. And so it's funny that Joey Votto goes into that and it's just immediately like funnier than all of them, but being taught like, no, do this, ta ta, ti ti ta, like little
What I
noises.
would
We're gonna
give
play
to
Space
have
Jam.
just seen one of those classes, man.
Yeah. And it would have
To
been funny
just watch one.
for you to be there in Buffalo and say, do you think are you going to be playing for the Blue Jays this weekend against your old team, the Cincinnati Reds? And he says no, and then you say no blocking,
Yeah.
and then he has to say, sorry, I didn't mean no, I meant yes, and I'll see you Sunday. Oh
Oh
God,
man.
that is
I
pretty
had
funny.
so many great questions planned for him too, and I don't know if this was like the wrong approach, but I was just gonna be goofy, just be like, listen, obviously, Joey, we're all well aware of how you've always stayed fashionable and cool throughout your career, and now that you're playing with all these kids, have you learned any new vocab or slang? Has anyone complimented you on your riz? Right? And just see where he goes with
You
that,
couldn't, and you didn't, yeah, you couldn't ask any of those questions. So the mood, did you get to ask him any questions?
Didn't get to talk to him.
Really?
didn't get the opportunity. I was loaded with him too because I know he's learning Spanish, so I wanted to bring up how my wife's also learning Spanish, and she does this thing when we go to Mexican restaurants that she forces the server to talk Spanish to her so that she could practice. And I wanted to ask him like who on the Bisons, like your Mexican
Hmm.
restaurant server, like who are you forcing to talk Spanish with on the team?
Yeah, that sort of reminds me of my dad, except my dad's was racist, where he would affect an Asian accent whenever we ate Korean food, and I'm like, you can't, you're not allowed to do that. You're not. But
No.
he would make it seem like it was him trying to fit into their culture or something, and I'm like, what are you doing with that accent? And he's like, well, we're in a Chinese restaurant, I'm ordering. I'm like, no, lose the accent. Like, what are you doing? And he wasn't doing it in like a overly racist way, but he was affecting enough of their accent that he was taking on enough characteristics. And I'm like, stop doing that. That's not going to be taken the right way.
Yeah. So, last but not least, before we move on from Joey Votto, here's just some insane stats. So this is one of the more impressive stats about Joey Votto. He has a 389 career on base percentage against lefties. Like
Oh my God.
against righties, it's like 450, right? Like it's insane what it is
Wow.
against righties, but against lefties. So this is the list he's on for left-handed batters against left-handed pitchers with a career on base percentage. Babe Ruth 450, Trish Speaker 439, Ted Williams 431, Barry Bonds 417, Ty Cobb
Oof.
413, Lou Gehrig 401, Stan Musial 392, and then Joey Votto there in at number
Oh
8.
my
Like that's
God.
insane.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess the only question I have about him is he going to be one of those guys where we go, how is he not in the hall? Or is he going to just make it, like creep in?
I
Or
don't
will,
know. It's going to be interesting to see because I mean there are examples of guys like John Olerud and Carlos Delgado that just you know they were first baseman. And
yeah.
if you're not literally out of this world as a first baseman, the hall does tend to kind of snub you, right? So
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
said,
that's
Joey,
interesting.
I do feel like he exemplifies the new era of baseball, right? Like where on base percentage does matter, the little things he did does matter. And I don't
Mm.
know if it will
Yeah.
translate, but I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think, I mean, most people are saying he's in, and then that'll be, yeah, we got two left hand. Yeah, we got a great pitcher and
Yeah.
two excellent left-handed hitters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Larry Walker
Larry.
was right field, right? He played right. Did he play right field most of his career and then
Yeah.
switch to first, or was he right
Yeah.
field pretty much till the end? Yeah,
He did.
he was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I would put
S-
both those guys in basically the same category.
so would I.
If you ask me like who's better, I'd be like they're kind of tied, in a very Canadian way. Like it's kind of like
Mhm.
they're both right there. I wouldn't take one over the other.
So this is the last thing I'm going to talk about with Votto before we move on here. But these are legendaries. This is from Matt Atomic on Twitter. So I'm just giving credit here because he did the work of digging this all up here. So I don't just seem like I'm a research genius or anything like that. Matt Atomic on Twitter has accumulated a list of the retired players, legendary players who retired with Toronto's AAA team without ever playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. So number one, Deion Sanders, right? Former
Oh,
uh,
God.
ended
Wow.
Vladimir Guerrero, Hall of
Okay.
Fame, finished with the Las Vegas 51s before he eventually finally called it quits. Joey Votto, number 3, obviously. And then you have two-time Cy Young winner Johan Santana.
Oh God.
And then number 5, Jamie Moyer, who pitched
Wow.
until he was
Yeah.
49 when he was pitching with
Was he
AAA.
49 there?
49. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, those are the guys, I guess, that just love baseball, right? Like they're like,
Right?
okay, I'll grind
You
it.
will
I'll
pry
grind
the
it. Go
ball
down
out
to
of my
AAA.
cold, dead hands. Yeah.
Yeah. And Votto probably feels kind of robbed, right? Like you trip, like, yeah. But it's one of those stories you read and you're like, did he trip on a bat or is it
Yeah.
just kind of over and but he came back and he played. He tried to play.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it wasn't just some stunt or whatever. It was like, I want to play. I want to play a season for this team or half a season. And then halfway through the year, maybe you're still in it. Maybe you can bring him up. Like there'd be a lot of talk right now if we were still in it about like, but yeah, then he maybe would have retired earlier just to be like, look,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be an option. Like you're not going to be able to bring me up and I get the big home run. It's not happening. I can't hit a 93-mile-an-hour fastball from a guy who's 93 is dead straight and he has one extra pitch. So
I
I'd probably,
actually respect a lot that Votto was just hit a point where he was like, I just can't do it. Let's call it. Like
yeah,
he could have kept doing what he's doing and forced the Jays to be like, maybe like we can't really
last
send you down to
homestand,
double
make
A. How about we just
$2.
call this a career? So all the
Yeah,
best to Joey, obviously. And like
yeah.
it was a
What was
great
the
attempt.
one? I mean, nobody's brought up the one. What was the blemish that he had? Like but and I even liked how he dealt with that,
Mm-hmm.
where he was honest, where
Yeah,
he's
so
like, I
he
was feeling jealous and like,
so James Paxton pitched a no-hitter against the Blue Jays in Toronto. And then the Reds wound up coming like very quickly afterwards. And so he was asked by the media, hey, does this give you any warm and fuzzies as a Canadian that a Canadian threw a no hitter in Canada? And his response was very kind of petty and jealousy, where he was just like, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but Canadian baseball hasn't done all that much for me since I left the country. I was developed by Americans, coached by Americans, uh, given all my opportunities by Americans, and that was pretty much it. So, which
yeah.
of course, Canada, us,
Yeah.
we're very sensitive with
Well,
stuff like that.
it's probably mostly true, right? Just like it would mostly be true of a German kid who moved over to Canada to play hockey. Like most of the
Yeah,
people, are you proud to be a German? Like, I mean, if you wanted to be a dick about it, you could say like, well, most of my training was in Canada. Like most
yeah,
of the people who taught me everything I needed to know to play in the NHL were in Canada. Like they were
but
all
that's not
Canadian.
what home countries want to hear,
Yeah,
right? Like,
no, that no, maybe, and then, but I liked how he handled it because afterwards he was like, "Look, I was being kind of a jealous baby, and congratulations to him." And he didn't have to do that. He could have just like,
no,
screw you, and then that's it. I'm not going to say anymore.
yeah.
So yeah, even when something like rocky happened, and rocky things do happen when you're, a guy who likes the spotlight, kind of, right? Like
And in the
he,
league for 17 years, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, you're gonna be asked questions. He liked to joke around, like so yeah, you're gonna make a mistake here once in a while, and he owned it.
all
So
right, we're getting long in the tooth here. We will move on to trade deadline winners and losers in the former Jays. So these are the league winners. The best trade deadline performance of this year, Kansas City. The Royals absolutely crushed it at the deadline. Lucas Urseg has a 0 ERA right now in 10 innings pitched.
uh,
He's been great in that bullpen for them. He's only allowed 4 hits, 0 walks, and 14 Ks. I mean, he's been incredible at the back end of that bullpen. Former Blue Jay superstar Paul DeYoung has been incredible with the Royals, hitting 286 with a 340 on base percentage, a 558 slug, 3 home runs, and elite D at third
you know
base.
what? You know what storyline has really gone away is that whole Blue Jays outfield cheating thing. You
Yes.
know, where
The men in white, the men in white.
like nobody's talking about the Jays cheating at hitting anymore. And I think Paul DeYoung ushered that era in of people. Maybe that didn't happen. Maybe that never happened.
Maybe that never happened. Finally, Michael Lorenzen was also picked up, and he's at a 1.99 ERA over 22 innings. I mean, outside of Yusei Kikuchi, he's pretty much been the best starting pitcher picked up at the
Yeah.
deadline. The losers, the Baltimore Orioles, nothing has worked out from their trade deadline. They picked up Trevor Rogers, optioned. They full on optioned him. Gregory Soto for the back end
Already.
of their
Like,
bullpen, 15.43 ERA. He's blowing up 3 different times. Zach Eflin, who pitched well, but Now he's on the IL for the rest of the year, right? And then Sir Anthony Dominguez, who I love that name, by the way.
That's
Sir
just
Anthony.
great. Yeah,
I know it's a Dominican name, but Sir Anthony feels so royal, right?
I
Sir
know.
Anthony.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing.
So
And
he's
Kikuchi's the
had a 3.27 ERA, but has blown three of his six save opportunities. So, and it's why the Orioles are no longer. Actually, before I say that, I should double check here. Who's even at the top of the AL East right now? Yeah, the Yankees have taken back over. The Orioles have been on a terrible stretch recently.
and good for Kikuchi because like that's mentally very difficult when you're waiting for something to happen for that long, and then when it does happen you have that added heat of like, oh, it seems like the new fan base that I'm going to despise
Already hates me. Yes.
because they have overvalued their own assets, like, which is you fall in love with your own prospects, like you
Oh
just do.
man,
You fall in love
fans
with them. Like
101, right?
it would be like us being like, what do you mean we lose Lop? I mean, if the trade happened in reverse now, it'd be like, so we're losing Loper, Fido, Wagner, and like we'd be like,
Yeah.
this is crazy, but it's like, no, 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 man. These are like, triple A guys that you're giving up for, and none of them are 22,
So
right? They're
Yusei Kikuchi, we'll start with him in 4 games. He's pitched 22.1 innings. He has 31 strikeouts, Sean. Like he's literally striking 1.5 batters out an inning. It is nuts what he is doing. He's walked only 7, has an ERA of 2.42. Danny
20.
Jansen. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Yeah, go ahead, Danny. How's Danny doing? I haven't really been paying attention.
You know what? Danny Jansen doing very Danny Jansen things. So in 41 plate appearances, he has an OPS of 795, showing a little pop, has 2 dingers, 5 RBIs, a batting average of 257, 8 strikeouts, 6 walks. Literally, like it's a mini sample size of what a macro sample size of Danny
Yeah.
Jansen would
And
look
it's
like.
either what's his playing time like? Does he, because they got rid of McGuire right away,
Yeah,
right?
so he's and then Wong is their other catcher. So he's pretty much catching 4 out of 7 games.
Wow. So
Yeah,
I mean, they brought him in, and he's their
he's
main
their
guy.
go-to guy. He's their go-to guy. He's
Wow.
been good.
I always thought he was good at handling pitching staffs. Like he didn't frame it as well as Kirk, but his teammates obviously loved him. And another sort of sad story of the Blue Jays 2024 season where like everything just implodes, where you're like, why don't we re-sign Bo? Like Bo doesn't like being here. Like, why don't we
Yeah.
re-sign Danny Jansen? Danny Jansen doesn't like being here. Like, so the season is just loaded with these stories of you're like, all your kind of favorite Jays, oh, they don't want to be here.
Hmm.
Like, they're out of here. Like, why didn't we re-sign Danny Jansen? Because he didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
That's why he wanted to leave. Well, I can't hate Danny Jansen. You know who I can't hate? Ross Atkins.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
nobody
Feed
wants to
me
like,
that
yeah,
Atkins hate.
feed me the
Throw
hate.
another log on the fire.
Yeah, throw another log on the Atkins burn. But I'm
So
not gonna start hating Danny Jansen.
Danny Jansen again doing Danny Jansen things, and I will say the same thing about Trevor Richards. Uh, Micro sample, but it's literally would translate to a macro size. So he's got a 3 ERA over 9 innings, a 1.1 WHIP. So he's not walking or giving up many hits. 10 Ks, 7 walks, which is Trevor Richards to a T. Lots of Ks, way too many walks, and
Yeah. And it's sort of like he's a guy where he needs to move around a bit. Like he
mhm.
can't stay in the same division for too long because the changeup plays if you're like, yeah, but if once you've seen a Trevor Richards changeup 150 times, it's not that scary of a pitch. But yeah, so he needs to move around, move divisions a little bit.
He was sure good for this Jays team, though. I know that there were moments where he was
Yeah,
awful, but like all in all, it's funny because they moved Rowdy Tellez for him, and everyone was up in arms. Rowdy, how could you do this? Like, how could you let him go? Of course, first year in Milwaukee, he pops 30 plus bombs, which is always a tough one to swallow. But I mean, if you
I
look at
know.
the return now, Trevor Richards was phenomenal for this pen. I mean, maybe the word phenomenal is the wrong one there, but he was very solid and needed and
Yeah,
logged a lot of innings. And then
yeah,
Bowden Francis came back in that trade too. And I mean, he might wind up as our number 5 starter
yeah.
next year, which would,
And how did he go for like? Because he had an amazing spring training. And
Hmm.
then a lot was written about the expectations for him going into the season being like, hey, this guy's gonna be good. Like this guy's gonna really surprise you. And then he got his head caved in a couple times, and then that was it. And so good for him to kind of
Yeah.
bounce back in season, in the same season where you kind of like, because that's a real blow where you're like, if you're a starting pitcher, like it's all swag. It's all sort of like, I'm gonna get you out, like, and to get your head caved in to start the season and then make your way back to where now he looks like, yeah, I mean, he's going to be a starting pitcher for the team next year. But I mean, how like this team has had, I don't know, maybe I don't pay enough attention to other teams, but it's like Alec Manoa, like all the stuff that you look at with this team and go, is that happening in other markets where you just have a Cy Young guy that just can't pitch? And then not only that, but the attitude, right? The Jays always seem to have guys that are like, Alec Manoa wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, guys. I need to go down to AAA and get this figured out. He was like, F you, Blue Jays organization.
Yeah.
That's my baseball, and I pitch every fifth day,
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter if I'm getting people out or if they're hitting or if we're winning or if we're losing. That's my baseball. Like that was his attitude. And that's Bo Bichette's attitude. And that was Chapman's attitude. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like it just seems like we get these guys that, they're not necessarily team first guys, right?
We'll call them fiery, Sean. These
We'll call
fiery
them
guys.
firecrackers.
Firecrackers.
Right. Just not
Uh,
really team guys. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, you know, putting themselves above. They seem like team guys. They speak like team guys. But as comedians, we know like the comedians who get the most laughs and like if you went to a comedy show and you were to pick from who you saw on stage who you'd want to most have a beer with, that is the most likely person to be a fucking psychopath.
Yes. 100%. 100%.
So as fans, we can't judge like what we see in the media because that's that psychopath potential. The person who seems like the most down to earth and the most fun and the whatever is probably a fucking lunatic.
Yeah.
With
Turns
Manoa,
out
like,
they
there
just know
shouldn't have
how to
been any.
pretend to be a human really well. Yeah.
Manoa should not have. There shouldn't have been any of this waiting 2 weeks to go to Buffalo and being pissed off. You're pitching like shit.
Yeah.
Don't be a fucking baby about it. But he was, and then the Jays know that they can rely on fans to blame the front office. So they get to behave like shit, and then they know that the fans are going to be like, this is probably on Atkins. This isn't
I
on
mean,
Alec Manoa being a baby.
Alec Manoa is one of the biggest question marks for next year. To be third in Cy Young voting in 2022, and then to have the drastic drop off that he's had, and to go through all of the rigors of rehabbing and yeah, even the argument they had that he was like, "Yeah, my arm is fucked," and they're like, "I don't know, all the tests say it's fine," and then to eventually wind up with Tommy John, and you're like, oh, that's not a good look. Maybe there was something going on there.
And it's funny.
You know,
I read something about how it would have been called the Sandy Koufax surgery, but Sandy Koufax wouldn't have the surgery done. It was
I
Tommy
did not
John.
hear that. That's
Yeah,
wild.
and Tommy John was the guy who's like, fuck it.
Yeah,
Like, give me the surgery. And then he came back and was better than he'd ever been.
better than he's ever been. Yeah,
But Sandy Koufax turned it down. They were like, we do this thing with a ligament, whatever. And he's like, nah, fucking no thanks.
I'll just call it.
But yeah, I mean, we were that close to just being like, oh, then he got the Sandy Koufax, like that
Yeah,
would have been his surgery. Because the doctor who came up with it offered it to him first.
Sandy Koufax, man. That's like the one guy that I wish I'd got to see pitch. You watch like old footage of him and you're like,
No,
man, he was just so badass. Like,
that's what's going to be different. I mean, who knows? But I mean, that's what's going to be different like 50 years from now when we're talking to, our grandkids or
yeah,
about our favorite players. They'll be able to go and see it in 4K. They'll be able to go
yeah,
see Vladdy 2021 or Vladdy 2024 in 4, and we'll be like, see, but back then it was like, if people tell you stories about how great they were, and then all we get to see is like this weird like Western piano. There's a
yeah.
West country and like,
Grainy, black and
yeah, there's
white.
a
Yeah.
piano in the back. There's a fast piano song in the background that you hear at a saloon in the 1850s. Everything is moving fast. Everything's triple speed. And you're like, what is that real? No, that's not real. That's a grainy black and white video taken from the 1300s or whatever. Yes, so we don't, we just hear the stories. We don't know. Like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what Sandy Koufax pitched like. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you hear the
Okay.
name.
Oh, I mean, and you look at his numbers and you see some of the stuff he's done. Obviously, one of the greats, but it, yeah, you do feel like deprived, right, from like getting to see some of this like historic baseball
Yeah.
greatness. But we'll wrap up here, okay? So Nate Pearson doing really well with a change of scenery. He's looked great outside of his first inning where he gave up a home run and hit two guys and then got thrown out. But he's
Yeah,
got a
and good
two.
for him for, I mean, give him some credit for, because that could have been like, if,
Oh,
and he
it could
always,
have been the here we go again, right?
he was
And
one
it
of those
wasn't.
weird guys where like it seemed like the velo didn't play. And it seemed that way from the very beginning. I remember like the very beginning watching him, like, yes, he threw that pitch 99 miles an hour, but it
How
looked
are they
like that guy
catching up
got
to
to
it?
it. It
Yeah.
looked like that guy got to it pretty easy, So it was just like maybe his pitch sequencing, maybe how straight his fastball was, but it just seemed like, I mean, I'm watching a guy throw 99 and 100, and it just seems like it's still hittable.
Walks were always a big problem too for him. So he'd put a guy on and then yeah, someone would tag him for a homer and then
Yeah,
he's given up 2 runs, right? So he hasn't walked or given up hits almost at all. He's got a 0.79 whip, which is incredible,
man.
2.38 ERA, 11.1 innings pitched. He's getting lots of play at the back end of that Cubs bullpen and
And why do
has
you
10
think why do you
Ks.
think he was traded when he was like prior to needing to trade him?
I think the Blue Jays gave up on him. I think they probably had an organizational meeting and was just like, if he's going to do something, it's just not going to be with us. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just got to move on from a guy, right? Like,
Yeah. I was wondering, like, maybe he was like, I'm a starter, or, maybe he was leading the chart. Maybe it was like, look, this guy's a pain in the ass. Like, but yeah, I mean, he never really, he'd have those moments. Like, we've had those guys where it's like Merriweather,
yeah,
where you're just like, oh my God, we found the best bullpen arm in baseball
yeah.
for a week. And Pearson couldn't really stay healthy. And then when he was healthy, he wasn't that effective. And yeah, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. So I wish him all the best, like it is nice to see. I mean, that kid's been through a lot. We've talked about it on the podcast quite a bit, Adam and I, but I mean, he was doing freaking interviews with MLB.TV where they were asking him questions like, so when you're in the Hall of Fame, right? And they're like prefacing questions about like the Hall of Fame and this. I mean, that's the problem with the hype of a number one prospect, right? Is like sometimes things just get out of hand. And if you can't deal with that and like, compartmentalize stuff in your brain, I mean, he was 23. That's a lot to put on a 23-year-old kid to be like,
Uh,
tell us how you will react in 20 years when you're accepting your Hall of Fame awards.
Yeah, and like that's one of those ones where it's like, listen, don't blame the Jays. Like he just didn't. It just wasn't there. He kept getting hurt, and it just kind of wasn't there. Like I've never seen anybody throw 99 and have hitters go, "Thank you very much" before. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just, and that to me, that's what threw him off. Is like his stuff just played everywhere. He never really had to worry much about anything before it gets to the big leagues, and guys are like, thanks for that super straight 99-mile-an-hour fastball. I'm going to drive it off the wall.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? And then he started having command issues because now you've got to nibble. Now you've got to, like, for the first time in your career, you've got to locate. Like it has to,
Mm-hmm.
it can't just be a fast, but it's got to be located. And now you're missing because you're trying to locate. And yeah, it just all unraveled on him. But he never even had one of those years where he just like, he came in and you were like, holy shit, is Nate Pearson look great this year?
He
Like,
hasn't. He hasn't. I mean, we saw glimpses as Jays fans, but we never really saw him ever put it together for any kind of
no.
period of
Or the
time
talk coming out
consistently.
of spring training is, my good God, you got to see this guy pitching right now. Like, that never happened either.
So going to our trade with Seattle, Jimmy Garcia and Justin Turner, both Seattle Mariners right now. Both of them have underperformed for that team. Of course, the Mariners on a big skid right now. They've fallen out of contention for the division. I shouldn't say fallen out of contention, but they are 5 games back and they're running out of time. So
And they
JT
fired their
since
manager, right? So
yeah, just fired their manager, Scott Service. So since becoming a Mariner, JT is hitting 196, 11 hits, 9 RBIs. And then
mm,
Jimmy Garcia has a 6 ERA in 9 innings of work, 0 saves, 3 home runs allowed.
that's that's surprising.
He's looked nothing like what we saw out of him as a Blue Jay in 2024, which is really too bad for
Yeah,
the Mariners. But that's
I know.
relievers, right? Like, talk about a fucking roll of the dice.
I know. And that's why, it's like, yeah, maybe the Jays did pretty well in that trade because it was sort of like this guy's coming off an injury, but you know how good he's going to be. You know what he was doing
Yeah,
before. Like, I mean, come on, give us the price tag for the thing he was doing
yeah.
before. And of course, you're always like, I don't know, this grapefruit's a little bit soft. You're feeling it, and you're like, I don't know. It's like buying watermelons. It's just like, what's inside of this? I don't know. Like, what's in? Is it one of those seedy, grainy ones that taste like sawdust? And
You keep knocking on Garcia's balding head. You're like,
yeah,
it
it's just
sounds
like,
hollow.
if
How
it's
much
dark green
juice is
on
in
the edge,
there?
it's like, yeah. Can I cut this in half and not buy it? No. Fuck.
And then on
Uh,
the other side of things, Kevin Kiermaier, the Dodgers have caught a little bit of lightning in a bottle with the guy. I mean, to the point where they actually DFA'd Jason Hayward, their other kind of, fourth outfielder type of thing. Kiermaier has in the last week is hitting 350, 7 for 20, 1,000 OPS, a home run, 5 RBIs, which, by the way, that's out of 20 at bats, and he has 4 fewer hits than
man.
Justin Turner, who's been playing for the Mariners for 5 weeks now. So
And
4 weeks
how
now.
long until that interview where he's like, I'm just really enjoying this change of scenery. I
Never
never,
felt at
oh no,
home in
never really
Toronto.
felt like home. Yeah, we're discovering the downside of trading assets and getting younger pieces or whatever. Is they go to the new place, they do well, and then they shit on Toronto and say, like, I never really felt at home there. They didn't have good pizza. They had bad pizza.
They had
The town
bad
had
pizza.
bad pizza. And you're like, fuck you. You never went to Vinny's. Yeah,
Okay,
no.
so we're gonna end on a quick Aaron Judge stat, which is Aaron Judge through 127 games in 2022 was hitting 295 with a 396 on base percentage and a 661 slug, 49 home runs and 109 RBIs. This was his big breaking uh
Wow.
Maris's AL home run record this
And I
year.
think he'd be the first guy to hit 60 twice, right? Since like, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
like since cheating, since all those guys were trying to get their girlfriends pregnant in the 90s.
So Aaron Judge through 127 games this year, he's hitting 334, an on-base percentage of 465. Like Sean, there hasn't been an on-base percentage like this since Barry Bonds. Like it is insane. And what's
Oh,
even wilder, nobody walks Judge. Like I shouldn't say that. The Jays walked Judge to the point where Yankees fans were literally losing their mind. But
good.
outside of the Jays,
Yeah.
he's been given very few.
And that is a fuck you from the Jays to the Yankees, and it's well deserved because Boone
Yeah.
is the biggest fucking crybaby in
Oh, isn't
baseball.
he? Oh
The
man.
biggest fucking crybaby in
Yeah.
baseball. Like he's all over umpires all the time,
Yeah.
every game. And it's like fucking shut the like I couldn't hate the Yankees more.
Me too.
And I wish Aaron Judge was on the IL, like I wish he wasn't putting up these numbers. And the other thing that's a real kick in the ass is he took less money to stay there,
I know.
like stuff like that we would never hear from Vladdy's camp, that we would
Oh
never hear
no.
from Bo's camp, that
No.
we would never it's like, oh, you're in Toronto, like, well, you're gonna have to pay more. Like we probably had to pay 5 million more a year to get Springer away from the Mets. And Judge takes would have gotten more money if he'd signed with the Giants. Like, yeah. So the whole thing sucks. He's not even a
It
bad guy. I mean, I
I
wish he
know.
was a
That's the
bad
worst
guy.
part. That's the
Yeah.
worst part is he's genuinely good for baseball. He's got a
Yeah.
720 slugging. Like, so 47 home runs and 117 RBIs. He is better than his 2022 season in every aspect, minus 2 home runs. And like you stated, he could be the first guy in the non-steroid era to hit
And the non
60
getting girlfriends pregnant era.
in a non just keeping them
Hey guys,
childless.
I'm just your average 21-year-old who needs a little help getting his 20-year-old girlfriend pregnant. That's so great. What a lie.
Listen,
What a fun lie, you know. It's a fun
what
lie.
a nice little Easter egg you've given for everyone who understands and knows what you're talking about with Aroldis Martinez, by the way. Anyone out there, there's so many people that are like, what does he mean? But
What is he
now
talking about?
look up
Yeah.
Aroldis Martinez.
But yeah, I wish I could hate Aaron Judge. I can't, yeah, I kind of can't, you know, like he's just a beast, just insane that he's would to be able to do what he's doing. Like, you know, and he doesn't
the
I mean,
last
he has
the
Stanton
last
hitting behind him, but Soto
yeah,
was, I mean, I don't know how much of like I don't know if I'd get into the Soto sweepstakes. It's going to be so much money. It's going to
it's
be
gonna
like
be
some kind of
insane.
weird, bizarre, not Shohei, but like in the 5 to 6 or something. It's going to be stupid.
It's gonna be
And
insane.
and I don't trust it at all because like all of a sudden, oh, he's a good teammate. Is he a good teammate, or is this how he can lock in for 12 months when he knows it's payday? And he's
And
hitting in front of Judge.
who
Like
knows what his
they're
term winds up being, right? Like, this is the thing. I really do think Soto might be the first guy we see locked in for 15 years, which
and
is
I wouldn't, I
so
mean,
long.
what is he he's a below average right fielder,
Hmm.
right? He's not a gold glove level
Oh,
outfielder.
his defense is
So his
average
defense
at
is not
best.
going to
Yeah.
age well. He's not
No.
going to age well out in the outfield. He's probably going to be moved to first base within three,
A
four
few
years.
years. Yeah.
And then he's not going to be, if he leaves New York, he's not going to be hitting in front of Judge. You know, like, I don't know. That's a very scary contract. Based on what he's done this year, it's very frightening.
It's really interesting. I'm excited to see how it all plays out because it is going to be historical. It's going to be all of those things, right? It's going to be something baseball's never seen before. It's probably going to be the longest term contract in history. It's probably going to be the biggest number for a non pitching hitter combined
Mm.
unicorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy.
I don't even know if I'd want to get into it, to be honest with you. Like if I heard the Jays were in on it, there might be like an initial hit of excitement, but it's like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
Jays
dangerous.
fans, Jays, we got hit so hard with that Shohei whiplash. I'm not buying into the Soto. I'm not buying in. Like
No,
I've
you're right.
decided, fuck that. You can
Yeah.
tell me Juan Soto is literally on a rooftop in Toronto with all of his closest friends, and I'm not believing it until I see
Yeah, I'm like, he's on
the
vacation. He's on
yeah,
vacation. Like,
yeah.
yeah, forget it. I'm not buying it. I'm not into it. It basically would just have to be like, okay, is who's reporting this, whatever, you know, like, yeah, it's
Well,
not, oh, it's
Sean,
Nightingale. It's
yeah.
JP
Oh,
Morosi and
Boob
Bob
Nightingale's telling
Nightingale.
us something. Yeah.
Oh man, what a hierarchy what a fun hierarchy there is in that in that media business, right? Where like if it's passing, you know, if yeah, there's you've got the names of the guys where like if they say it, it's true.
Hmm.
Uh in hockey, the same thing where you just have
Yeah.
these certain guys. And then I just feel bad for Shy and Arden and those guys. Like they get nothing.
No
Rogers throws them
bones.
nothing.
No bones.
Nothing.
Yeah.
They don't give them nothing. They don't even give them waiver wire shit. They don't even give him DFA shit.
No.
Like
Gate
passing,
14 breaks that stuff.
it's like they don't even. I don't even get the fucking DFA head up. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, how much could you hate me that you
Yeah.
can't throw me a fucking bone here,
Yeah. I love it. All
man?
right, Mr. Lacomber. Honestly, Sean, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for filling in
Yeah, it's
here
always
for
fun
Adam.
talking to you, buddy.
Always a blast. For all of you listening, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. Long Toss is happening Sunday. Going to do my best to make sure it's live. But folks, if it's not, it will be out pre-recorded anyways. We're going to make sure not to miss any more Sundays, even if we got to do it the old-fashioned way of just releasing stuff. I know that's not ideal, But doing our best here. Sunday from 6 to 8 Eastern, long toss. Check it out. In the meantime, everybody, thank you so much. Hit subscribe, hit like. Cheers.